What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eickman. Together, we're about to embark on an inspiring journey. Our community thrives on the wisdom of insightful leaders that are right here in our backyard. And we're bringing their expertise to your ears. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your guide. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence. Joel Swanson, a professional, one of the best EOS implementers here with us on the Homegrown Hustle. Definitely one of the best in the Twin Cities market, but I think he could rival across the nation. There's thousands of there's nice. Yeah. This phone. So there's thousands of EOS implementers, right?
Not thousands.
Not thousands, hundreds. So it's a select few. A few of the proud, the EOS implementers. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Joel, and then we can kind of get into some of the backstory and like how you got to where you're at, and really bring a lot of fire on this episode because, I mean, EOS, for those of you that don't know, they work with businesses to improve their businesses and scale, right? Create traction. So tell us about yourself, Joel.
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, so I've lived here my whole life. I grew up in a smaller town, and then...
Whereabouts?
Marshall, Minnesota.
Ah, I was just down there.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you say hi to Marshall for me?
Negative.
Okay. But yes, I grew up in Marshall and moved up here to go to school, and then just kind of never left. So I didn't ever intend to live in a city, but that's just the way my life has worked out. And so lived in Minnesota my whole life. Married 16 years. I've got 3 kids who are 13, 12, and 9. And yeah, we live in Eden Prairie.
And
that's my story.
And to the EOS part, tell us what EOS is from an expert's point of view.
Yeah, EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and a lot of people know it from the book Traction.
Gino Wickman, right?
Gino Wickman, yep. Gino Wickman created EOS, and the first book he wrote was called Traction. So a lot of people know EOS as Traction, but technically that's not what it's called. That's just the name of the first book. And so the Entrepreneurial Operating System is really about helping companies grow and scale in a way that doesn't increase chaos. So there's 3 main things that we talk about: vision, traction, and healthy. So vision meaning first getting the leaders 100% on the same page with where the organization is going, and then more importantly, how do we actually get there? You have to be cautious about that. But in other ways, that's where transformation really happens. People like me who like to execute things and follow a sequence will do good work, but we're going to grow things 8 to 10% every year, and it's going to be very
consistent as hell.
But nothing transformational ever happens without a visionary. And so you didn't specifically ask me this question, but I'm passionate about this, and so I'm going to answer it anyway.
Sick. I love that.
Yeah, I almost heard you discounting the value that you bring as a visionary to your team. Because your team, you said, my team wants me to stay out of the field because then I'll mess stuff up.
I want to stay out of the field too.
For everybody. But there's a tremendous amount of value that you as a visionary bring to your company that nobody else can do. And people like me who are good at executing will grow at 8 to 10%. But the phenomenal hockey stick ideas where we just change the world, that doesn't come from people like me that are good at executing. That comes from people like you that come into a situation and say, well, this is dumb. Here's a shortcut. Let's try it this way. And then everybody says, holy crap, why didn't we think of that before?
Well, or you piss people off, right? Because it's different and new and it's change.
Yep.
And that's the vision. That's where the integrator comes in, right? Like in the EOS model. Yes or no? Sorry, I kind of cut you off there.
Yes. In EOS, we have a visionary and an integrator. A visionary is somebody like you, full of ideas, lots of energy, typically have organizational ADD, always trying to stuff, 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag.
Yeah.
You ask for something at 4 o'clock and then at 4:30 you're wondering why it wasn't done yesterday. Yeah. lots of ideas. And most visionaries are phenomenal at taking things to the next level. They're terrible at executing consistently in a way that other people can follow. And so...
Because I'll change more shit, and then they won't know what they're even learning.
Exactly.
Excuse my language,
yeah.
but yeah. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
And so in EOS, we have a visionary and an integrator. An integrator is the person who's heads down in the business, watching the P&L, steering the ship on a daily basis. They're the person who's executing the vision. So my personality is more integrator than visionary. And so somebody like you that's got all the ideas, but isn't that good at executing, giving your vision to me and having me internalize your vision and then make it happen, that's the we call it the rocket fuel. That's the power of having those two personalities in a business together. And visionaries get a lot of credit for the amazing things they do. They also get a lot of crap because they can't get their timesheet in, and they show up late, and they ask for something, and then they forget that they asked for it. And a lot of visionaries were in trouble in school, because they couldn't follow the rules, they couldn't sit still, and they've been told people like you have been told your whole life to sit down and shut up and follow the rules. The school system is not designed for visionaries. The school system is designed for people like me.
Yeah, I buck that all day.
Yeah. So I bet that you got, I was valedictorian in my high school class. So I knew how to follow the rules. I knew how to play school. That's not how you rolled.
Yes and no. So I had like 4.2 GPA. So
wow.
But I also had the benefit of an older brother who had that capability but didn't perform, and I saw the result of that, and I knew I didn't want that. So I realized if I just get good grades, my parents kind of stay off my ass, right? So, and I'm incredibly competitive, and I don't like people being better than me. So going to a private school, everyone's parents invested a lot into them, and although I wanted to be the valedictorian, there were 6 people in my class that had 4.0s.
Yeah.
So, or above 4.0. And so technically it was a tie in my head, but not on paper. Anyway, I actually graduated 4th, but it's out of 50, so it doesn't really matter. But how do you rabbit hole me like that? So you were a valedictorian. Congratulations.
Well, that wasn't the point, is to show up and brag about high school.
Well, we got 6th grade covered. We got high school. All right. What do we got next? What do you do in college? Just kidding. So the integrator, that's where we were, right?
Yes.
You keep describing visionary, making me feel all weird over here because it's true. But back to the get in trouble at school part. That's where you were at. Let's pick it up from there.
Sure. I did not get in trouble at school. Lots of visionaries did. You're a little bit unique in that you're a visionary personality who has figured out how to operate in the real world. Lots and lots of visionaries didn't have that luxury. And so they're phenomenal entrepreneurs, but they've swum upstream their entire life. Mm-hmm. And they get a lot of crap from a lot of people because a lot of people see he didn't show up on time, or they see he didn't get his timesheet in, or they see he didn't follow the process that he himself created yesterday. Mm-hmm. But
so funny.
But they don't see the courage that the visionary has. They don't see the ideas that the visionary has. They don't see that this company wouldn't exist without the power of that visionary's ability to see the future. One of my clients said recently that the visionary's job is to make sure that we get to the future before the future gets to us. And I really like the way they said that, because there's a future coming down the road that you as a visionary see that most of the rest of the world does not. And your job is to make sure that your company is ready for that future, and your company can take advantage of that future when it gets here, rather than waiting until the future arrives and then say, holy crap, now what do we do now? Mm-hmm. And so when I heard you say, my team wants me to stay out of the field, I want to make sure that and this isn't just about you, because we're talking to a lot of visionaries.
Correct.
I want to make sure that you as a visionary, specifically Matt, but also all the visionaries who listen to this, understand that they're wired in a way that transforms the world. And they're wired in a way that most people don't understand and won't understand. But that doesn't mean that what they're doing and who they are is not phenomenally, phenomenally valuable. Because people like me who are not visionary aren't going to change the world. The way that I'm going to change the world is by helping entrepreneurs like you do your thing. And I'm going to go back to Connected Families. So about the time that I met Connected Families, my church put out a call for volunteers in the nursery. They needed more people to volunteer in the kids' church. And I could volunteer there, and I could have a positive impact on a handful of kids and a handful of families. But I thought about it and I said, the potential impact I can have on the world by helping Connected Families do what they do better is going to be exponentially greater than the impact that I, Joel, can directly have on these handful of kids. And so that's my mentality when I go into work with different companies is I'm not going to change the world. You're going to change the world. You, Matt, are going to change the world. So how do I help you and put you in a position to be able to do that, to be able to give, to be able to self-sacrificially overflow into the lives of people around you? You can do that better if your business works well.
So what are the hurdles you have to overcome with that when you're like working with the CEO like that?
Hurdles. Can you say more about that?
Like, what are the things the CEO's thinking, or like preconceived notions or thought processes that you have to like rewire or address and work through with a visionary in that early process? I know this might not be on the journey of your personal journey, but I think there's something there if we explore it real quick. Then we'll go back to
the biggest thing that I find I need to help visionaries with is giving them permission to be themselves. And just a couple months ago, I was working with a client that the current CEO, visionary, was not the founder. The founder had retired a couple years before, and this person had been there a long time and took over as the leader. And he was struggling with saying he didn't know if he really wanted to sit in that visionary seat. He didn't know if he was qualified to sit in the visionary seat. And I started asking him questions and dug down. And what I figured out and helped him discern is that he felt like he needed to do it the way the founder did it. And I said, no, Mark, no, you don't need to do it the way that the founder did it. What this organization needs is it needs you to be Mark. It doesn't need you to be that other guy. It needs you to be the visionary the way that you do it and bring your unique self to this team. And once he understood that, the light bulbs went on, and all of a sudden he's thrilled about being the visionary because he knows he's free to be the visionary in a way that's truly him and not the way that somebody else wants that to be. And so that's pretty common with visionaries, is helping them understand the value of truly who they are and helping them not try to be somebody else. Because like I said, so many visionaries have been told their whole life, sit down, shut up, you should be more like your sister. Damn. Or whatever.
That's some deep stuff there, man.
Oh yeah, we're going deep.
Yeah, going deep. I love it. That's the only way I do it. So let's keep going. Let's not stop.
All right. With so many visionaries being told, sit down, shut up, be more like your sister, they lose the value in who they are. And a lot of times what I'm doing in sessions with them is helping them free themselves up to really be who they truly are. Because to the extent that you can really be Matt and not try to be somebody else, you're going to be more effective, you're going to be happier, it's going to take less energy. And that doesn't mean that we don't have to do things that are difficult for us sometimes, but the more we can do things in a way that's easy for us, the more power and the more influence we're going to have in the world. And so you trying to be somebody else, you personally, Matt, trying to act like somebody else, be more like some of the people you hired who are better at organizing things, there's not a lot of value in that. The value in you is going out and having these phenomenal ideas and creating partnerships and looking at different ways that we can change the world. That's the value of you as a visionary.
But also for other visionaries too, right? Like you're not just saying that specifically to me. It's more just because I'm in the room. I want to make that clear for everybody because I know that there's people that are going to listen to that, what you just said, when this goes live, and they're going to think, damn, this guy's like some type of palm reader or something. But okay, so let's go back to your journey. So you were working with the visionary of what's the name of that organization again? Sorry.
Connected Families.
Connected Families. And that was your first client, customer. And
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the difference between the first and the second.
Difference between the first and the second. The biggest difference, even though it was only the second, the biggest difference is I'd done it before. And when you bring on people in your organization that have never done this thing before, the first time you do it is always going to be a little bit weird. But you do it a second time, and it's less weird than it was the first time. And so just having the confidence of saying this isn't the first time I've done this made it a lot easier with my second client.
Gotcha. There's something to that, because I think a lot of people are in that space in general with their businesses, and they never get to the second time because they aren't willing to try the first time. Anyway, so fast forward. So how many customers have you had now, or how many companies have you consulted with over the years?
In EOS, like 50-ish.
Damn. So what's the difference now in your approach between the second and the 50th?
I know when to color outside the lines is the big difference. And the vast majority of the time, I believe that pure EOS is exactly what my clients need. But if I ever perceive a difference between what does the official training say and what does this team really need, I'm always listening for what does this team need. And then secondarily, what does EOS say?
How do I use the tools and resources that I have to help this team get what they need?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a pretty badass position to be in, man. Like, you get to help people do their thing. How come there aren't more coaches like that? Or consultants? What do you call yourself?
Well, we don't. We're very clear that we're not consultants.
Spies. Just kidding.
I have one client who calls me her work therapist.
I almost said that, but I've interrupted you enough in this conversation. I'm going to minimize that. Keep going.
I don't know how to run your business. Abracadabra Environmental. I have no idea how to do that. My job isn't to come in and tell companies how to run their business. My job is to come in and make them talk to each other and help them address the issues that they actually have and hold up a mirror and say, this is what you're doing. Is this really what's working? And if not, you want to try something else? And creating a safe environment where people can be open, honest, and vulnerable. So I don't call myself a consultant, and that's very intentional. But I stand at a whiteboard and I talk at people, and I do a lot of listening, and so people think of us as consultants. But
teacher, coach,
facilitator, coach. Those are the three roles. Teach the content, facilitate the right answers in the room, coach along the process, point out things that people don't see.
Yeah, so you make them talk, you hold a mirror, so you make them look at themselves, and you make it safe.
Yeah.
Those are key dysfunctions of businesses that are, those threads kind of go throughout all businesses, right? And those are like the human components to it, correct?
Yeah.
So one of the first things you said, you said you come in, you talk to these visionaries or these business owners, and you ask them what they want. So do the visionaries even really know sometimes what they want?
Sometimes visionaries know what they want. Sometimes they don't. What's more common is that they know what they want, but they haven't figured out how to say it in a way that other people understand. And I worked with a client, was a manufacturing company. They make huge machines that test equipment. And in one of our sessions, listening to the visionary, listening to the integrator, and I said, so what I'm hearing you guys say is, and just kind of laid it back out for him. And the visionary sat back, and it's just in silence. And I could tell that he was kind of, emotionally impacted by what I'd said. And I said, so what's going on here? And he looked at his team and he said, this is what I've been trying to say for 5 years. And it's not that he didn't have a vision. It's that visionaries' minds work so differently that a lot of times it's difficult for visionaries to speak to the civilians, speak to the muggles, in a way that everybody else understands. And so helping the visionary translate that vision into something that non-visionaries can actually get on board with is more the challenge. So when I ask visionaries, well, what do you want? Sometimes they know, but a lot of times they've got pieces of it or they know what they want in their head, but they haven't had somebody to be able to help draw that out in a way that they can communicate it so that somebody else can actually execute. Because like we said, you're going to change the world, Matt, based on being a visionary. You're not going to change the world based on being somebody who lines up all the ducks and gets them in a row and dots the I's and crosses the T's. You need other people to do that. But they need to understand your vision. They need to understand what you want. And
so you're an interpreter.
Yeah,
Okay.
Actually, that's a good way to put it. I haven't thought about it that way. But yes, I do a lot of translating and interpreting, helping the visionary say what they're trying to say in a way that other people understand.
And maybe taking more time and being more patient in that communication. I know for myself, I can get impatient when I communicate and somebody doesn't fully comprehend it, right? So rather than the frustration, you help bridge that gap a little bit and maybe communicate back with the visionary, like, yo, dude, calm down a little bit. Like, let me ask you a few questions and we'll get to what we're really trying to do here. Fascinating. Okay, so this is going to be out of left field. Wait, let's finish up with, so they kind of know what they want, sort of know what they want, don't always really know what they want, though. And then when they do know what they want, they can't communicate it.
Yes. Sometimes.
So you bring clarity to the visions with additional context and input from the team. And is there other sources that you try to bring into these visionaries to help them really like make that clear?
99% of the time, all the answers are in the room.
Bingo.
So when I'm working with a team, we don't need anything else. And that doesn't mean that there's not research to be done. It doesn't mean that we have all of the answers. But in terms of what I do in the room with the teams, helping the visionary figure out what he or she wants, helping that person say it in a way that everybody can understand, and then helping people align priorities to be able to get there and structure accountability in such a way that the organization can support that vision. That's really what we're doing.
Okay. So then as you help a company grow and scale, could you speak a little bit just to like the evolution of a visionary because I mean, if it's a young business, like I started my company, it was like me and my father-in-law. That's my initial experience. But as I've grown, like there's been like, I don't know, like the reimagining that happens with business growth and leaders that have to do that. So is there a trend or a thread that you've seen that of like hurdles that visionaries have to overcome as their business is growing and they're growing alongside it?
Yeah, hurdles visionaries need to overcome.
Maybe plateaus is a better word.
There's a lot, so let me
That's a
try
good
to
question.
distill
He's
this
thinking
down.
about it.
So I'm going to tell you a story. My father-in-law is a combat veteran from Vietnam, and he doesn't talk about it very often, and I don't blame him, but every once in a while he'll say something about Vietnam, and he told me this story one time of doing a nighttime escape and evasion exercise. So in country, before he was actually went out into the field, he led a recon platoon. So they plotted off a section of land 1 mile long, 1 mile wide, 6 miles long. At dusk, all the guys in his troop got lined up at one end of this 6 mile long plot of land. And the objective was to make it all the way to the 6 mile mark or to survive until morning without being captured. And there were other soldiers, other American soldiers.
Trying to kill these dudes?
No, not trying to kill, trying to capture. And so
you said survive. I was like, yo, the armies, they're intense. Sorry, back to your story. I messed it up. Okay.
And so all these other troops were trying to catch the people.
Okay.
And there was a compound in the middle of this area where if you got captured, you got brought. And they would simulate interrogation and
sounds like cops and robbers.
Yeah, it's not good. You didn't want to get there. Found himself about 2 o'clock in the morning looking at that compound. Like he'd avoided being captured by the other troops, saw the compound. Smart man, backed up, went around, and about an hour and a half later, where do you think he found himself?
In there.
Right back where he started.
He's walking in circles?
He walked in a circle.
Nice.
Now, lest you think that that's because my father-in-law is incompetent. Grew up on a farm, oldest of 3 boys, ran his own business his whole career. 5,000 guys in his training unit in Vietnam. He was the fastest through the obstacle course. He used to hunt rabbits by chasing them down. Amazingly competent man. Walked in a circle, not because he's incompetent, but because he didn't have the ability to see the horizon. It got cloudy. He didn't have a compass. And this doesn't just happen in cartoons. Like in real life, people walk in circles in the wilderness.
I've done it before, trying to go out to my tree stand, man. It's rough.
Yeah, it's rough. Left-handed people go one way, right-handed people go another way. And a big hurdle that visionaries need to overcome is being disciplined about taking time out of the day-to-day to be able to see the horizon. And if he could have seen the stars, if he could have climbed a tree and seen the horizon and been able to orient himself, he wouldn't have walked in a circle. But a lot of visionaries, you work your ass off, and this year looks pretty much just the same as last year. And let's be real, you just walked in a circle. You spent a whole year working your butt off, trying to serve your customers, trying to grow things, trying to take care of your employees, and you got nowhere. And a lot of that is because visionaries are not disciplined about taking time out of the business to think and to see the horizon and see where they're trying to go and watch where their feet are pointed and decide if they like that. And if they are, great. And if not, we got to make some changes. So that's a big hurdle that visionaries need to overcome, is being disciplined about taking time out of the day-to-day in order to think on the business, work on the business, working on the business, not in the business. Mm-hmm. Another big hurdle that visionaries need to overcome is understanding that, like you said, the business changed, there's reinvention, and the people that are with you now may not be the appropriate people when your business is twice the size. And I have another client that in one of our first days together, they were talking about a particular woman they were having some trouble with. And I said, okay, so we figured out what your core values are, and does she align with your core values? And they said, well, not really. I said, okay, well, what position is she accountable for? Okay, great. These are the things she's supposed to be accountable for. Is she doing those things? Well, not really, they said. Okay. So how long has it been this way? And they said, well, she's been with us about 15 years. This has been a problem for probably about 10. Like, okay, so for 10 years, so do you think it's going to change? And they said, no. Okay. So
you ask them these questions that should make them feel dumb, pretty much.
Yeah. So I ask questions that make them feel, I hold up the mirror. So
yeah.
This person doesn't uphold your core values. She's not good at her job, and you're telling me it's been that way for 10 years and it's not going to change. Is that what I'm hearing?
Let's keep her on. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so I convinced them to let her go. And at the end of the day, the visionary said, it's probably a good thing that you made us do that because we've been dancing around that for about 10 years. And it's good to have loyalty to your people, but it's not good to assume that just because somebody was good at thing A means they're also going to be good at thing B. And having visionaries need to overcome that hurdle of we can't keep people just because we like them. And success in the past doesn't equal success in the future. And it's likely that you won't have the exact same team 3 years from now that you have today. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad leader, and it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It means that the world changes, situations change, circumstances change, and visionaries need to adjust to that.
They need to be okay if somebody walks out the door and not take it personal. That was one of the hardest things I had to figure out. Because anyway, so visionaries, all these emotions, all these ideas and thoughts, lack of organization. Can you talk about more the integrator personality? Because I'm sure that we'll have some integrators listening to this as well. Or integrator. You're the implementer, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So the integrator, a typical integrator is organized, on top of her game, on top of his game, good at having hard conversations, good at tracking details, good at managing projects, good at execution. Doesn't mean that integrators can't have good ideas. And when I say visionary and integrator, it's not binary. It's not like you are either this or that. Some people can do both really well, not very many.
Everyone's on a spectrum of visionary and integrator somewhere. Yes. Are there more than just those two? Okay. So there is this, it's like the visionary integrator axis, pretty much. They're going to fall somewhere in you're either mostly a visionary, maybe a little bit integrator, or integrator, not so much visionary. And there's a even smaller percent of the population that is good at both of those.
Yes.
Because naturally, those tendencies are polarizingly different, right?
Yes, not very many people can do both of those roles and do it well. And an integrator, it's kind of a thankless job, and that doesn't mean it's not valuable, but it means that like at your company, you, Matt, are typically going to be the person that gets the credit. You're the entrepreneur, you're the visionary, you're the face of the company. You stand on the mountaintop and point and say, this is the way we're going, and it looks really cool. Now, you can't make it happen. And I say you, meaning a typical visionary.
Yes,
typical visionary can't make it happen.
I'll personify the visionary for the sake of this conversation.
And everybody knows Walt Disney. They don't know his brother that actually made it all happen. You know, everybody knows Henry Ford. They don't know who Henry Ford's right-hand man was, who made it all happen. And so the visionaries tend to get the credit. The integrators tend to make it all happen. And when I'm in sessions with clients and we're figuring out who's going to sit in the integrator seat, I tell them, like, this is kind of a thankless job. Like, do you really want this? Because you got to sit in between the visionary and the rest of the organization. You've got to go toe-to-toe with the visionary and have the visionary be upset with you because you're not going fast enough. You have to filter the ideas of the visionary. You've got to make sure everybody goes faster than they want to go, because most people want to go at a very safe speed. And part of the value of the visionary, I keep going back to the value of the visionary. The value of the visionary is making everybody go faster than they want to go and achieve things that they didn't know that they could achieve. You as an athlete, your best coaches were ones that could pull out of you what you didn't know that you could do. And good visionaries in business are like that. They make people do things that they didn't know that they could do. And so as an integrator, you've got to champion all of that, all at the same time. And that's really hard. That's a really hard job.
Is it hard? It's probably a silly question, but is it harder to do that as an integrator than it is to do the visionary role in a company?
So is it harder to be the integrator, or is it harder to be the visionary?
Yeah, well, because pretty much you're saying the visionary needs to like kind of not give a F. You know where I'm going with there, and the integrator needs to understand the visionary for how he is and for that, and like their true whole self, and be able to communicate that with the team. And they're stuck in that role where they got to understand everybody, but also be able to communicate and make sure everyone follows the visionary. Like that's a lot. There's a lot of juggling.
It is a lot of juggling, but the reality of most people, Matt, is that in a sense, anybody can do anything. It just takes different amounts of your soul to execute it. You can show up on time. You can get your timesheet in on time, but it's going to require way more effort from you than it would be for somebody who's wired like me. I can have good ideas. I can take big, scary concepts and champion them, but that takes a lot more of me. It takes a lot more of my time. It takes a lot more of my energy. It takes a lot more of my focus, whereas you do it in your sleep and you don't even think about it. So it's difficult to say, well, this job is easier or harder than that job, because it's all about the person and what is your skill set, and trying to make sure that we maximize you doing the things that are natural for you and get other people to do the things that aren't natural for you. Same thing, me as more of a typical integrator personality, focus on the things that I'm good at and partner with a visionary like you who can have the crazy ideas and is energized by the crazy ideas.
So when a visionary is trying to evoke change, or they have one of these ideas and they're trying to say, okay, integrator, make this happen. In my mind, as I'm thinking about it at the surface level, like having just a tribe of integrators behind that integrator instead of some guy with another idea would make it easier, but probably everyone being too the same, the work culture can suffer at that point then, right? So those other roles that aren't the visionary integrator at the top of the company, like how does everyone else figure out how they're supposed to move and behave within that organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. And as a visionary, it's tempting to think, well, this would just be easier if everybody was somebody who listened to me, took execution and did really well. But that's easy for a short time. But one of my claims to fame will always be that I was talking about diversity before it became a cool thing to do. So there's a phenomenal power in having very diverse perspectives and very diverse opinions. And having a team agree all the time is often not the best thing. Before we got married, my father-in-law said to me, he said, if you and your wife agree all the time, then one of you is unnecessary. And I kind of laughed. I'm like, haha, Al, that's really funny. But the more I thought about it over the years, I've probably repeated that 100 times to different people and different clients. And having a team that gets together and agrees on everything really isn't the best thing. Having a team that disagrees but knows how to fight fair is where the power really is.
So like you create the rules almost in the framework there. Let me think about this question before I just throw a random one out there. So is that framework and the definition of that framework, is that what creates success or failure within that visionary integration or visionary integrator relationship for businesses? Like the framework of like, this is how we're going to handle these conversations and interactions?
Yes, the framework and agreeing on the framework and, like you said, kind of setting the ground rules for it is the foundation for the success of that relationship.
Fascinating. So if that never takes place, everyone's ears should perk up if this is a problem in your business. But so if that conversation never takes place because it's hard and there's emotions involved, whatever it might be, there's no foundation. Like you can't, like any of the cool shit the visionary comes up with, it's like throwing it against the wall almost and just hoping something sticks.
Well, either the visionary takes all of the ideas and forces them all through, and as a visionary, you probably have 20 ideas a week, and 16 of them are bad, and 2 of them are okay, and 2 of them are pretty good.
Yeah.
But if you try to force all 20 of them through, nothing's going to get done, and you're just going to piss your people off. If an integrator says, all right, we're only going to do the things that are easy and safe, then everything is good and it's predictable, but we're also never going to outsmart our competitors. We're not going to get to the future before the future arrives if we're just doing everything safe. And so the healthy tension between that visionary integrator relationship is part of the power.
Healthy tension. I love that. So for businesses that might not have an implementer, what would you recommend to those people in that position to try to begin the process of solving that problem?
Solve the problem
of a lack of framework.
There has to be a framework.
Mm-hmm.
EOS is not the only answer.
Yeah.
EOS is what I do professionally. I think very highly of EOS, but it's not the only answer. But if there's, one of the things we say is you cannot run your company on multiple operating systems. You have to choose one. And so regardless of whether it's EOS or something else, there has to be a set of ground rules for how are we going to do this. And the same way in a marriage relationship, a husband and a wife, if they're working together well, talk about and work out kind of the ground rules of how do we do this. Like my wife and I have learned that nothing good happens in a conversation that we have after about 8:30 at night. So if it's an important conversation, we don't do it after 8:30. Okay, well, that's just a simple ground rule that we've figured out in our marriage that helps our marriage be better. And the same kinds of rules, and it's not a rule that can never, ever, ever be broken, no guidelines, but the same kinds of things need to be established for a visionary and an integrator. And so how are we going to do these ideas? How many are we going to execute? How are we going to decide which ones we're going to do, which ones we're not going to do? And just having those awkward conversations is really, really important. And a lot of what we do in EOS is teach people how to say things that we've all been taught since kindergarten that we're not supposed to say. But to the extent that we can truly be open, honest, and vulnerable with one another, we're going to get to where we're trying to go faster. And so that framework, how do we get to the framework? Regardless of what the framework is, how do we get to the framework? It's about being willing to be open, honest, vulnerable.
It's almost like the 5 dysfunctions of a team, like that. The vulnerability part is like people don't want to do that. It's unsafe, and that on the emotional, the personal side, they're at work. They're supposed to be like super serious and all businessy, right? But that doesn't build trust.
No, and what Matt, for those of you who are listening who is not Matt, what he's talking about is Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And we use that in EOS. Oh. And so the five dysfunctions, so we're big Patrick Lencioni fans. And the five dysfunctions is a pyramid, and there's 5 behaviors that we talk about, and it's about building trust, having conflict, having commitment, having accountability, and having results. And the foundation to that is trust, and specifically vulnerability-based trust. And so trust is used 2 main ways in English. It means predictability. Like particular client, I trust that they're going to show up and he's going to have 3 different cups of coffee because he always has 3 cups of coffee. Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying is he is predictable in that way. When we talk about trust in this context, we mean vulnerability-based trust, which means I can say I made a mistake. I can say I need help. I can say I don't know. I can say I changed my mind. I can say I disagree with you. I can say I think you're wrong. And having that be an okay thing to do. If teams are not willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable and really embrace that vulnerability-based trust, in a sense, there's nothing that I can do for them. And everybody says that they're willing to do that, but when I call out, all right, wait a minute here. So, Matt, I saw the way that you looked at Susan, and there's something going on. You're like, well, we're time out. What's going on here? What's going on between you guys?
Let's fight.
Let's fight.
Let's do this. Let's get it out instead of don't hide that stuff. Like put it on the table. Who's got $5 on it?
Yeah.
But
hopefully we're not.
But it has to come out, right? Like otherwise, it's. Yeah, sorry, continue. I want to hear it out of your voice instead of.
It has to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And building vulnerability-based trust is about doing that well. And I feel a huge part of my role is creating a safe space in which that's possible for people. And being the person that can sit in the middle of that and convince people that it's going to be okay. And yes, I'm asking you to say this really awkward and scary thing, but I, Joel, am here in this room. I'm going to make sure it's safe for everybody. I'm going to make sure that we have a fight in a way that is productive and doesn't just tear people down. Because teams having fights in a healthy way galvanizes teams. Mm-hmm. Teams are stronger when they have a fight and they come out the other side healthy and productive and professional. Yeah. So teams that have no conflict are not healthy teams. Teams that have conflict are healthy teams, assuming they do it in a way that is professional and is safe and really honors people for who they are.
And logical, right? Like the emotion's there, but we're talking about the emotion to get it out. So that we understand, and then we make decisions and have conversations with the logic part of our brains after we get past that I can trust you and where you're coming from conversation. Because if we can't get past that, like I can just walk out of a meeting. I'm saying but people can walk out of a meeting and say, wow, that guy's a dick, and not listen to anything that was just said because that's all they were hearing because there's no trust.
Exactly.
It's crazy. Malcolm Gladwell, Speed of Trust. I think is that Malcolm Gladwell? Anyway, Speed of Trust. It's one of my favorite books.
I'm going to write that down.
You haven't read that book?
I haven't.
It's a killer one. But it talks about what you're talking about right there. So in your experience, what are some things that you've seen companies, like some steps you've seen companies do that maybe aren't in a healthy place and they come to you or you watch them from afar? And they go from that to a company that is working with a healthy visionary integrator relationship. But based off of your experience, what would you recommend some steps that businesses would take to kind of start working in that direction? Obviously, could sound like a pipe dream to some people because of where they're at, but what are those steps? That was a very long-winded question, I know.
Yeah, and it's a good question. Like, what are the steps and how do you... If you find yourself in a situation that's dysfunctional, that's unhealthy, where people aren't willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable, where you are, your business is running you, you're not running your business, what do you do? And the biggest thing is really putting in place the foundational tools of execution. And everybody wants to have all these wonderful ethereal conversations about who we are as people and where we're trying to go. And none of that matters if you can't actually execute. And so in EOS, we don't start with vision, we start with traction. and putting in place those foundational tools of execution. So who's accountable for what? What is that accountability structure going to look like? What are our priorities for this quarter? How are we going to solve issues? What metrics are we going to look at on a daily or weekly basis? All of that is important to get ironed out before we can have intelligent conversations about what is it going to look like in 10 years. And so the solve for people who find themselves in that kind of dysfunctional situation isn't let's have more conversations about what it's going to look like in 5 years. It's more about, okay, well, how do we execute today? And how do we build a vehicle of execution? And the foundation of that is accountability, and who's accountable for what, and what are our priorities going to be, and let's going to agree on those priorities. And then we're also agreeing, if we agree on these priorities, that everything else is not a priority.
But how does the ops play into all that then?
How does the ops?
The operations of just general day-to-day stuff. We have these priorities, these rocks we're trying to move, but what about like somebody needs to go out and make a sale today? Like that has to happen every day. How does that, those type of how do people within the business manage like juggling the focus, I guess, of those things?
Yeah, and everybody has a day job. And so in a sense, I'm gonna Pareto this. So 80% of what you do every day is your day job. And it's the things that you need to do to execute every day to move the company forward. And that stuff has to happen no matter what. 20% of what you do can be on the business, proactive. How can we improve things? How can we move it forward? How do we make sure that next quarter is better than this quarter? How do we change our processes so that we can make more sales? How do we change the way that we are tracking metrics so that we have better visibility? All of those things also need to happen, but is a smaller, you can't ignore your day job to be able to do those things. But looking at just agreeing on, if all you do as a business leader is you get in a room with your people once a quarter and you say, what are our top priorities for this next quarter? And don't make it more complicated than that. Just say, what are the top priorities? And get all 18 suggestions on the wall and then narrow it down to 4 and agree that those 4 are going to be the top priorities and that the other 14 things that were written on the wall we're going to ignore in order to get these other 4 things done.
But those other 14 sound so good. Let's just put them in there.
That's what
the visionary would say,
That's
right?
what the visionary would say. But here's the thing. When we set a 1-year plan in EOS, we say 3 to 7, hopefully closer to 3. Because most companies try to get 16 things done and they get almost nothing done. So how many are we going to focus on this year? We're going to focus on as few as possible to actually get them done. In 10 years, I have had one client in 10 years set 7 goals for a year and hit all 7. One. So.
But you've had more than one set that many goals.
I've had definitely had more than one set that many goals. But typically, when people start doing this, they say, well, all these things are really important. And so we're going to try to do 6, we're going to do 7, we're going to do 8 because they all have to happen. And I know they're not going to happen, but they don't know that yet. And so they try to execute all this stuff and they get a couple things done and they get a bunch of stuff half done and everybody's frustrated and disheartened. But the teams that say, no, we're going to make really, really hard decisions about what we're not going to do in order to be able to focus on these 3 or 4 things that everybody agrees are the top priorities. And then they actually ignore the other things in order to focus on those 3 or 4. They actually make way more progress than the teams that are trying to do 11 things.
How does a team, like what are the steps a team would have to take to go through taking 18 and whittling it down to 4? What are the questions they ask amongst themselves is it just the healthy debate and back and forth of, no, these are the 4 that we're going to do and just kind of hash it out there, or are there better questions that could be asked? If
there's only one question, I'm taking everything that I do, an entire EOS journey with a client, and I'm packing it down into
75 minutes. That's how I like to do things.
Yes. You're a visionary. Right, there we go. It's magnitude of impact. And what's going to have the greatest magnitude of impact? And this sounds really simple, but teams struggle with this.
Because they don't know how to measure impact. Or Or why do they struggle?
They struggle with it because they confuse impact with how visible it is. They confuse impact with how many people need to be involved. And so they want to set their priorities based on what are things that everybody has to have a hand in, or what are the things that are going to look the best. And I'm constantly pushing them to say, I don't care how many people need to be involved. I don't. All I care about is saying what's going to have the greatest magnitude of impact on the organization. And you get to decide what impact means. Sometimes we need to prioritize short term. Sometimes we need to prioritize long term. Is it impact in terms of our image in the marketplace? Is it impact in terms of potential risk? However we do those
money?
things.
Like, how about that one?
What's closest to the dollar?
Cool.
What's going to have the greatest impact? So the things that have the greatest magnitude of impact, those should be those top priorities. So when we look at all 18 of them and we say, okay, well, it can only be 4, we're looking and saying which of these 18 are going to have the greatest magnitude of impact.
Okay. So then how does top line, bottom line, P&L, all the whole financial component to every business, how does that play into that process?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we don't in EOS pull out financial statements.
Fascinating.
My assumption is that you as a business owner either understand the finances or you have a finance person who understands the finances who you trust. And so obviously we need to make money. And when we say what are the top priorities for the year, we're doing that in the context of what do we think the revenue is going to be, what does the profit need to be, and how do we what are the things we need to do to back into
reverse engineer results. The whole process. Yeah. Okay.
So I personally don't see my clients' financials.
So how do you help then? That assumption? Sorry, that was a really direct question, but let's do it.
How do I help?
Yeah. How do you help if you don't know that? Because that's part of. So does the visionary just communicate that with you? This will give this result. We'll profit this much off of these activities, and then you help facilitate that conversation.
Well, the flaw in what you just said is the visionary says to me.
Word.
Because my job isn't to understand your business. Now, do I understand most of my clients' businesses? Yes. Some of them I could run. Some of my clients, I have trouble following their conversations. So the idea isn't that I know what your profitability ratio should be and what this should be. And the idea is I'm creating an environment in which you guys can have those conversations. And when I see the CFO get nervous, I'm calling that out if nobody else does and say, okay, well, Matt, as the visionary, I hear you saying this is what you're trying to do. I'm looking at Richard over here and he's looking uncomfortable. So I think that you should talk with Richard and let's figure out what this means. So Richard, why the look? Why are you uncomfortable with what Matt's saying?
Are all EOS implementers the same?
Are all EOS implementers the same? No.
What's the difference between EOS and other coaches or coaching platforms? If you had to put that in a 2-sentence answer.
Sure. Several things. One is that we don't research, comment on, or knock our competition. And so EOS is not the only option for helping a business grow and scale. But I don't. You don't know. I haven't researched other competitors. I can say we talk in EOS about 3 uniques. Like there's lots of different companies that do pest control environmental. Why would they bother to work with Abracadabra? And needing to zero in on these 3 different reasons. So maybe some of your competitors do one of these 3 and maybe some do 2. But if somebody wants all 3 of these things, the only place to get all 3 is right here with Abracadabra. That's what we call the 3 uniques, and having that be a sales tool. And in EOS, that's Vision, Traction, Healthy.
Gotcha.
So Patrick Lencioni, his organization does phenomenal work on organizational team health, but doesn't do vision and traction the way that we do. There's some organizations that do phenomenal work on vision, but they're not building healthy teams in the process.
What should people think about when they're selecting who to work with as a consultant or as a coach, EOS or otherwise? Like, what are some things that would help you if they've already thought about before they come to you?
Sure. So when people are looking at hiring a business coach, there's two sides of it. One is what is the offering, and second is what is the person. And so for me, there's a combination of two things. It's EOS and it's Joel. And the early on in my practice as an EOS implementer, most of the value that I brought was EOS, and a little bit of the value that I brought was Joel. And over time, I've seen that shift towards now, some of the value that I bring is EOS, but the vast majority of the value is truly me and what I bring into a room. But there's still both. There's what is the system or program and who is the person. And so whatever it is that you are looking at for business coaching, understanding what that program is or what that offering is, and how do we know that that program or offering is a good fit for my organization? Because EOS isn't the right fit for every organization, and I could tell you situations where it's not or it hasn't worked, and anybody who's trying to tell you that what they have is the right solution for absolutely everybody is lying. So which solution is going to work best for you? And then honestly, it's for the person that's chemistry is the most of it is we're going to be stuck in a room together for 8 hours having awkward conversations. And if we don't like each other, then this is going to be a really long day. And so regardless of whether it's of what kind of coaching program you're looking at, if you don't really like the person, then don't do it because you're not going to be able to have open, honest, vulnerable conversations, and it's going to be a really long day.
Is there a little bit of a runway with that, with a coach or a consultant? Because that trust has to build over time, right? So, like, if you don't like or trust that person, well, the more you learn about somebody you work with, or the more you start to understand who they are and what they're really about, does that decision need to be made like really ahead of time, or do you go off of like the initial, yeah, I can vibe with this guy, and then 90 days down the road, maybe learn something and it changes?
Mostly what I'm looking for when I say you've got to know if you resonate and you've got chemistry with this person is there a reason to just eliminate this right away? And
like a disqualifier.
Yeah, it's more of a disqualifier. And you can learn to like somebody more and you can learn to trust them more. But if you don't like them from the beginning or you don't trust them from the beginning, then that's not going to help. I interviewed somebody one time as a coach for me who I was recommended. I don't remember how I was connected with him, but I met him and he wanted to show me a video of something that he'd done with another one of his clients. And so he showed me this video, and it was they're having an interaction over Zoom, and he's sitting there without a shirt on. And he's like, sorry, I didn't have a shirt on here, I was just working out. So I'm like, so he'd worked out, didn't have a shirt on, got on a call with one of his clients, recorded it, and then wanted to show it to me. And I'm like, some people are probably
wrong here, bro.
Maybe some people are fine with that, but it's like, I nope.
Yeah.
I don't like this guy.
Makes sense.
It doesn't, he could be the greatest person in the world, but we are not going to like each other. And so let's not pretend that this is going to work. And so that's more what I'm encouraging people to do is if you've got any reason to disqualify, even if you can't justify it, you don't have to justify it. Just don't hire that person as a coach.
That makes sense.
You have to like the person. Okay.
So what about people that need a coach and haven't identified, hey, I could probably get a coach to better my scenario?
If in terms of
like somebody listening who they're not currently thinking about, hey, I'm going to go get an EOS implementer, but they're running their business and they don't even know what EOS or consulting is. Like, how do they know? Maybe this would be good for my business.
Yeah. Well, I'll be the first to say that if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. And
wisdom there.
If you're getting what you want from your business, like I'll speak directly to you, Matt. If what you're doing is working, Matt, if you're getting what you want from your business, if you feel like you are taking care of your employees, if you're taking care of your clients, if your business is as profitable as you believe it should be, if you are growing the way that you want to, then whatever you're doing is working. And you don't change, just keep doing it. Not everybody needs EOS. But if you feel like you're working too hard to get the results that you're getting, or you can't get your people aligned, or you feel like you are walking in circles, or you're running on a treadmill, or the business is doing more to you than you're doing to the business, then it can be a great thing to look at. But if what you're doing is working, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs an EOS implementer. Now, obviously, I think highly of EOS and what I do.
But it could be a shiny thing for people, right? And that's something that the book Traction talks about, is like those distractions. Like maybe just head down, keep doing what you're doing, and then that can help you just continue by not getting distracted. Sometimes that's all that companies need. I've found that personally myself. Like I am a shiny thing guy to the nth degree, and maybe most visionaries are. But that controlled focus on what's the future going to look like, taking themselves out of the business, like you said, can help kind of frame some of that up. So I could honestly have this conversation for a really, really long time, but I know we're getting close to the end here. If somebody's looking to get in touch with you or reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do that, or reach out to EOS as a whole?
Yeah, well, I'll give you my cell phone number.
Sick.
612-836-3656.
Okay, and then if they want to learn more about EOS worldwide, buy the book Traction or Rocket Fuel or some of these other ones we've thrown out there. But are there any other platforms where EOS kind of educates the masses, I guess, on kind of sort of what it is?
So I'm going to disagree with you about one thing.
Okay, cool.
You said, hey, they could read Traction. I don't tell people to read Traction. And the reason I don't tell people to read Traction is because, A, you're going to get the book, and then it's going to sit on your nightstand, and then you're finally going to get to it, and it'll be 5 or 6 months later. The second reason I tell people not to read Traction is because it's going to take you 6 hours.
So don't do the things Matt said. Do what Joel's about to say.
Myself or any EOS implementer will come in for 90 minutes for free and lay out, here's EOS and here's how it fits together. And everything that you need to understand about it, I can give you in 90 minutes, and you don't have to read a book. Because you and your leadership team need to also hear the same thing. So you buy the Traction, you give it to your leadership team, you say, everybody read this. 2 of the people aren't going to read it. And the people that do read it are going to have different recollections and different interpretations of what it says. So don't even bother. Just call me or another EOS.
Save a whole bunch of time. Just call somebody, go direct to the source.
I'll come in, I'll talk to your leadership team, I'll lay it all out, I'll tell you everything that you need to know. And if it's a great fit, fine. If it's not a great fit, fine. But don't go and
try to figure it out.
Don't go try to figure it out. Don't go pretend that you're all going to read a book.
Yeah, because nobody reads books too much these days. I crush it on the Audible, though. So is there anything else that you would like to say to anybody listening right now that might be helpful, or just generally about you and what you're doing over with your team? Yeah,
the biggest thing that I want to leave people with is that your business is going to be better to the extent that you can maximize your ability to be yourself.
It's powerful.
And you're speaking directly to you, Matt, that you being yourself, you being a visionary, you leaning into who you truly are is going to maximize the business, not you saying, here's my weaknesses, how can I try to do these things better? And the reason I do EOS is because it's the best system I've ever seen for helping people do that. But the goal is not EOS. The goal is freeing you up to be yourself and freeing your people up to be yourselves and leaning into your strengths and leaning into who God truly made you to be and celebrating that so that you can get what you want from your business, so you can overflow into the lives of people around you so that we can change the world.
That's what it's all about, man.
That's what it's all about.
I love that. So
before we go, I do have one other thing to say. Just I just want to be clear for the record that we were on. We took a technical break, and on the technical break, your producer said that this was her favorite interview that you've had so far.
Yes.
And so I just want to slide that out there, so for the whole world to hear. Yeah.
So anyone who wants to be on here, it's going to have to be better than this, because the bar's been upped a little bit. Danielle's measuring stick has set the bar off. So
ultimately, you got to keep Danielle happy.
Oh yeah, that's the whole reason we're doing this. Shout out to Danielle. She legit though. She is pretty much the only reason that this keeps going on week after week. So, quick question. So we ask everybody this question. So the word hustle in terms of business, could you define what that means to you?
Yeah. I'm going to define it slightly differently than maybe you're used to.
Perfect.
People think of hustle as like go fast. I think about it as like go steady. And one experience I had that was profoundly impactful to me was I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that don't know, this is a hiking trail that runs from Mexico to Canada. So it's a 5-month hike. And after the first mile of this trail, there's an actual mile marker, like stolen from the side of a highway. And my company name is actually Mile One, named after this. And when I was terrified starting this trail and thinking about what I had to do over the next 5 months. And when I got to that sign, that first mile sign, and I realized I'd gone a mile, the eureka for me was that I just have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And it's not sexy, and it's not flashy, and it's not standing in the mountaintop pointing the way, and I'm not going to get any trophies for it, but I have to put one foot in front of the other every day for the next 5 months. And when I think about hustle, I think the same thing. I mean, how many times as a baseball player did you run from the outfield to the infield? Unbelievable quantities of time. And it wasn't flashy, and it wasn't exciting, but doing those basics and doing them really, really well and being willing to put your all into the basics and keep doing it even though it's not exciting, and keep doing it even though it's not flashy, and make the right decision even though it's boring, and even though there's not some big mountaintop experience, but you need to just keep doing it over and over and over. That's when I think hustle, that's what it means to me.
Process.
That's
what I'm hearing.
But embracing it and celebrating it and really leaning into it.
So my college baseball coaches, shout out to Jimmy, they would love what you just said, because they hammered that into me. Like, the difference between like good and great is really freaking boring sometimes. Like, sometimes it's those little ground ball drills over and over and over until you can't mess it up.
Exactly.
And like, they would talk about it in terms of like training. These young guys all try to train like Justin Verlander or Roger Clemens, like these guys who are literally freak athletes. So they do all these crazy exercises when really they just gotta get simple, stay consistent, and just like be part of the process. I love that. That's my favorite definition of hustle so far. So 2 for 2 here, bud. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Joel. Fascinating individual. So much knowledge in there, business and otherwise. A lot of wisdom. I'm so incredibly grateful for you taking your time, coming out here to Forest Lake to be on the Homegrown Hustle podcast. Anyone wants to get in touch with Joel and they didn't take his number down earlier, feel free to reach out. We'll get you connected. Thank you all for listening to the Homegrown Hustle podcast. Again, I'm Matt Eickman with Abracadabra Pest Control. Check in with us again next week.
Thanks again for joining us on Homegrown Hustle. Our local business community thrives because of the brilliant leaders right here in our backyard. And it's been an absolute privilege to provide them with a platform to share their invaluable expertise. Stay tuned for more insight, wisdom, and inspiration from our local business champions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Together, we'll continue to nurture and expand our homegrown success stories. Matt Eickman signing off until our next insightful episode.